should say good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ray. I'm the Director General of the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in Melbourne, and I'm from Taiwan. I'm the representative of Taiwan in Melbourne. And thank you for inviting me tonight. And please allow me to say a few words. And I extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Australian Institute of International Affairs, Victoria, for choosing Taiwan as the destination for your study tours in 2019 to 2024. This decision highlights the importance you place in Taiwan-related issues, and we deeply appreciate it. Taiwan faces significant challenges from expanding authoritarian influence, making it crucial for democracies to unite and defend shared values. Despite the ongoing threats, we remain committed to our democracy and freedom. President Lai Ching-Te, his 4 pillars of peace, guide our efforts to enhance defense, boost economic resilience, strengthen international partnerships, and maintain stable cross-strait relations. We actively collaborate with nations sharing our values to ensure peace and stability in Taiwan Strait and the Indo-Pacific region. Taiwan is resilient and determined to remain the key players in the global tech supply chain and finding new opportunities in a changing world. Moreover, Taiwan's new southbound policy, advanced by President Lai, has strengthened exchanges and showcased our innovative capabilities. We are confident that Taiwan can play a pivotal role in regional developments. Taiwan understands the importance of international cooperations and will continue working closely with allies to pursue regional peace, stability, and prosperity. We welcome the international community's ongoing concern for peace in the Taiwan Strait and reaffirm our shared vision. And in conclusion, thank you again for the invitation today. We look forward to fostering closer cooperation and contributing to regional peace and prosperity together. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ray. Ni hao. Hello, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I was a study tour intern this year. I'm going to be presenting the Taiwan study tour report. Okay. Okay, just a little bit about myself. I was the Taiwan study tour intern. In 2022, I had a scholarship to study Mandarin in Taiwan for 6 months, and I lived in the 3rd largest city in Taiwan, in Kaohsiung. And during my time there, I had visited 16 out of the 21 administrative regions. And I have a strong interest in Taiwanese history and culture. I actually took Chinese calligraphy as an elective over there. And I'm also involved in the Australia-Asia space. I'm the New Colombo Plan Alumni Ambassador for Monash, and I've also volunteered for the Australia-China Youth Association. Second. Yeah, so this was the first AAA Victoria International Study Tour since 2019. The last one was in Taiwan as well. And this coincides with the elections this year in January. And actually during the pandemic, even though we didn't have a study tour, Taiwan was actually quite remarkable that there was Taiwan achieved 0 COVID cases without a mass lockdown and was one of the few economies to achieve economic growth. And the point of the study tour wasn't just about geopolitics, but also about culture, about religion, art, literature, and technology. And the study tour, as I lived in Kaohsiung, I was a big advocate to include Kaohsiung in the study tour. And this is what it looked like. So we started off in Taipei, did a day trip to Hsinchu, down to Tainan, and then Kaohsiung. So the first day, everyone just arrived to Taiwan. We have to make it not fit in too much. So we just went to 2 main iconic sites. So the first thing we first place we went to was at Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall. And this was quite special as they no longer do the changing of the guards in front of the statue of Chiang Kai-shek. And then afterwards, we visited the iconic Taipei 101, where we got to see watch the sunset from the top of the floor, I think 108th floor, incorrectly. The next day was focused on history. So we visited the Indigenous Museum in Taipei, and the indigenous peoples of Taiwan are actually Austronesian. So they're related to the peoples of the Pacific Islands, as well as maritime Southeast Asia, such as Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, and so on. Then right across the road is the National Palace Museum, which holds artifacts brought over by the KMT during the Chinese Civil War. These artifacts were from the Forbidden City in Beijing. In World War II, they were brought to Nanjing due to fears that Beijing might be bombed. And then the KMT brought it over during 1948 to 1949 to Taipei. Day 3, we had a day trip to Hsinchu, which is the Silicon Valley of Taiwan. And we had an introduction to the science park and learned about the amazing microchips that are actually made in Taiwan. And I'm not sure if anyone has an iPhone, but every single person here has an iPhone, has a piece of Taiwan in their phone and on them. Then afterwards, we went to the museum where we got to see how they make the microchips and the semiconductors. Then we ended the day with a reception at the Australian office in Taipei, with greeted by Rob Ferguson. Day 4, the first place we went to was the 228 Peace Park, dedicated to the victims of the February 28th, 1947 massacre throughout Taiwan. And across the road from the Peace Park was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We're very fortunate to have be welcomed to a reception lunch. And quite remarkably, we were on Taiwanese news, both Mandarin and English language sources. And then we ended the day visiting the Chiang Kai-shek Sherlin residence, where we actually got to see real history in the actual house that he lived in, alongside photos and furniture that was maintained to how he lived when he was alive. Day 5, we took the famous high-speed rail down to Tainan. And these high-speed rail bullet trains were made in Japan originally, if I recall correctly. And when we arrived in Tainan, we split into 2 groups. One group, led by Rowan, did a walking tour around the major historical sites of Tainan. I led a bit of a low energy option where we got to just go to an air-conditioned museum, the Museum of Taiwanese Literature. But this is quite special as it relates to our the lecture the next day, focusing on the development of Taiwanese literature from pre-Dutch colonization to today. And interestingly, it focuses a lot on the Taiwanese language, and this is actually my name transliterated into Taiwanese. Yeah, and as mentioned, we got to attend, was very fortunate to attend a lecture at National Chong Kong University about the Taiwanese language as literature of anti-colonialism. And these are the kind of things we can learn about, the history of Taiwan alongside language debates at the time. And this is very interesting. This was a rap actually that mixed traditional Taiwanese music with rap in Taiwanese language. And then afterwards, we got to visit Fort Zeelandia, which was a fort built by the Dutch in the early 1643. Earlier, okay, prior to 1640s, and until it was taken over by Koxinga, a Ming loyalist. And what's very fascinating about this fort is that it actually predates any Chinese claim of Taiwan. Yeah, the Dutch. Correct. And here's Wait a minute. Yeah. Here's Rowan at the Portland there. Then afterwards, we visited Cherkan Tower, which was built under the Ming and then taken over by the Qing dynasty, then the Japanese, then the KMT, and now it's a museum. And then, okay, day 7, we actually took a normal train, the Zhejiang train to Kaohsiung. It was only about 20 minutes or so. And once we arrived in Kaohsiung, we went to National Sun Yat-sen University, which was this university where I actually studied Mandarin, where we attended a lecture about geopolitics with Dr. Eugene Guo. And it was very fascinating because he basically presented his PhD to us. Yeah. An iconic site, view of Kaohsiung. And then next we visited the historical British consulate at Takao. Of course, this is actually a local favorite for National Sun Yat-sen University students. I used to come here all the time as a student. It's Japanese style ice cream. Then we took a short ferry to Chichen Island, and this is a Qing Dynasty fort we got to visit. And then that evening, some of us went to visit San Fengong Temple, which is lit up in red lanterns. Okay, day 8, we started the day with a workshop. We got to make fishing flag silk screen paintings. And what's interesting is this is a tradition brought over to Kaohsiung from Japan. Then we went on a walking tour led by representatives from Sun Yat-sen University around Kaohsiung, visiting iconic sites as well as seeing local food and art. And we saw, of course, we saw a lady with a ferret. I think there are different laws about pets in Taiwan. Okay, and then we visited the Pier 2 Art Center. So Kaohsiung's really famous for its street art. And then we ended the day with high tea on the 27th floor of the building, and we got to see a clear view of Kaohsiung. And some people said, oh, they actually enjoyed this experience more than Taipei 101, less crowds. And then that evening, we took the high-speed rail back up to Taipei. It was about a 1-hour trip. Yeah, 1 hour. The distance from Taipei to Kaohsiung it's about like Melbourne to Mildura, bear in mind. Day 9, if it was rest day, we had the opportunity to go to the northernmost point of Taiwan. And then visit the Jinggang Temple, which is famous for the 4-headed Buddha, as well as the representations of the Buddhist equivalent of hell. But I did not include photos because it was quite graphic. It was like, yeah, torture and things like that. Yeah. And then, of course, last night we had Michelin-star dumplings as a group. And of course, one of the highlights of the trip, the chocolate xiaolong bao. Yeah. Okay, last day, visited the presidential palace. It was originally the presidential office. It was originally the governor general's house under Japanese occupation or Japanese colonialism, and it became the house of the Taiwanese president since 1949. Then our last activity, it was when we were there, Tsai Ing-wen was still in office. Yeah. And then afterwards, we went to Ximending for lunch. And then our last activity of the day, we hosted two journalists, Kathleen Calderwood from the ABC, East Asia correspondent for the ABC, and Chris Buckley, the China correspondent for the New York Times.
Who is Australian?
They're both Australian, yeah.
Can he not be in China now? He has to be in China. No, he's still there.
Yeah. And then we had a debrief over coffee, and then you can read all about it in the Taiwan Study Tour report. Yeah.
Well done, Jesse. I could see that he spent days and weeks here planning all this. Most of it seemed to be revolving around, oh, well, there's a particular noodle shop I know there we should go. You can see how much the gourmet, approach was to keep the energy up of the participants. But as an intern, fantastic job, very, very detailed and a wonderful trip. So Rowan, now maybe ask you to make your comments here.
Thanks, Jesse. And it's tough to follow these terrific pictures and great memories. And thanks particularly those who came on the tour, who are here with us this evening. We had a really memorable time, and it was a great combination of having fun and learning a lot about this beautiful country and people. And thanks, Jesse. You did an absolutely fantastic job of organizing, really being the chief organizer and executor and sheepdog and everything else, making sure we get on the trains on time and so on. So thank you. A few days ago, we at the Australia-Taiwan Business Council hosted at the Gold Coast annual conference with our Taiwanese counterparts. Next year, the business conference will probably be held in Kaohsiung in southern Taiwan with our counterparts hosting. About 200 people took part this time over 2 days, with about a third coming from Taiwan. The theme was Smart Partnerships for a Smart Future. The topics explored by speakers from both sides included critical minerals, energy transition, biotech, advanced manufacturing, and cybersecurity. The event featured emerging business leaders from both sides, people aged under 35 who are working successfully between Australia and Taiwan. It featured a statement from both business councils endorsing Taiwan's membership of the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, the CPTPP, of which Australia takes the rotating chair in 2025. The speakers included Cameron Dick, who's the Deputy Premier of Queensland and the Treasurer of Queensland, who flew to Taipei to speak at last year's conference, and Donna Gates, the Acting Mayor of the Gold Coast, which has very active sister city relationships with 2 Taiwanese cities, Taipei and Tainan. 3 Queensland state MPs participated, as did 3 parliamentarians coming from Taiwan. The Federal Minister for the Future Made in Australia program and Assistant Minister for Trade, Senator Tim Ayres, who attended the conference and spoke at it, said the Australia-Taiwan relationship is, quote, significant and productive, underpinned by important economic, educational, and cultural links, including dialogue between Indigenous Taiwanese and Australian leaders, close quotes. He said that Australia, quotes, is proud to be Taiwan's supplier of choice for energy and resources, and this partnership continues to grow and strengthen, including as both undergo the transformation of their industrial systems. There's indeed a great amount happening at the business level, with Taiwan becoming Australia's 5th biggest export market, with overall trade worth $34 billion a year and mutual investment more than $40 billion. Trade surged 50% last year. Taiwanese banks are extremely busy here, with 9 now establishing branches and with $65 billion of Taiwan funds held here. Australia has become the 2nd most popular overseas destination for Taiwanese students, and more Taiwanese come here under the Working Holidays scheme for young people than from any other country, almost 15,000 last year. Unsurprisingly, more flights are being added and many are full each way. You can fly directly from Melbourne to Taipei, and you do not, if you're an Australian citizen, you do not need a visa. You just arrive and you can stay there for 3 months. It is surprising for me, given all these circumstances, that we have not yet, but some of us are working on this, any sister city relationship in our southern states, Victoria, South Australia, Tasmania, between Australian and cities or states and Taiwanese counterparts. You'd think it would be natural, but we don't. Queensland has stolen a march on us and is well ahead. But there's time to catch up. I was in Taiwan during the election at the start of the year, as well as with the study tour in April. And the focus of most conversations over that election period was on such domestic matters, meaning on the economy, on job opportunities, on wages, on housing and welfare issues. China, meaning these days, of course, the People's Republic, does not weigh heavily on most people's minds in Taiwan. Surprising that might seem to us. It's now 75 years since Taiwan was invaded by mainland Chinese, led of course by Chiang Kai-shek, Chiang Kai-shek, and his defeated Kuomintang army. It was a second invasion, coming after the arrival of KMT forces in 1945, following the Japanese defeat. And of course, the Taiwanese had been handed over to the Japanese in 1895 by the Qing government in Beijing. For much of the past 75 years, although not entirely consistently, Chinese Communist Party leaders have threatened to join this list of invaders. But over the last 30 years, the Taiwanese have developed a resilient democracy to match their inventive economy. In 1949, Taiwan was poorer than most of China. Today, the people of Taiwan are on average almost 3 times more wealthy than the average Chinese. Taiwanese people argued, campaigned, fought, and some died to run their own affairs long before the PRC was forged by Mao Zedong in 1949. Today's situation is a natural state of affairs. Very few people who live in Taiwan identify themselves as Chinese, despite speaking languages often categorized as Chinese. In the latest Pew poll conducted earlier this year, 67% describe themselves as Taiwanese, 28% as both Taiwanese and Chinese, and just 3% as solely Chinese. There were 2% don't knows or wouldn't says. The People's Republic of China, especially since the dark days of COVID and since it started its continuing economic slide, along with its shift towards greater protectionism, does not hold the allure that it once did for Taiwanese business people, some of whom have reinvested from China back to Taiwan. However, the allure of Taiwan's real estate, to use Paul Keating's crude phrase, has intensified this century for Communist Party General Secretary Xi Jinping and the party elite, seeking tangible glory to enable the pronouncement of the PRC's rejuvenation. She would, I suggest, be satisfied with a form of vacant possession of the main island of Taiwan, in a way commensurate with his now pretty direct form of rule in Hong Kong, whose political elite, barring the predictable fellow travelers now placed in charge by Beijing, mostly former failures, are either in jail or in exile. The people of Taiwan haven't sought the greater role of being a testing ground. Their election in January underlined their understandable domestic priorities, but it's become inescapable. What is being tested? What is at play as the story of Taiwan spools out? I suggest that the outcomes are too weighty for us in Australia and those in other free countries in our region, or indeed the wider world, to let burden the shoulders of the 24 million people of Taiwan alone. So Angus, thanks. The tests that are implicit in the way the fate of Taiwan is shaped from here on include, and I'm not going to answer all these questions. Each of them is enough for a book or a PhD thesis at least. Can the Kuomintang, one of the two truly consequential political groupings in Taiwan, fully focus on Taiwan itself, or must it remain in part distracted by looking over its shoulder to its Republic of China past and to the ROC's successor regime, the PRC? How best can the Chinese cultural world or Chinese-speaking world encompass its own natural, innate diversity? How can this world live respectfully alongside ancient indigenous cultures, such as those in Taiwan or indeed elsewhere? Can the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, tolerate a degree of social or individual autonomy, or must its will be pervasively imposed at every human level? Must the rest of the world agree with the CCP's largely politically directed version of the history of China and of neighboring regions and peoples? Can supply chains that incorporate both Chinese and Taiwanese contributions, especially of high-end tech products, be deemed dependable and resilient, or is disruption inevitable? How does the world define sovereignty? By a capacity to control everything within borders and to police those borders, or by a United Nations pronouncement, or by a pronouncement by a neighbor? Would neighbours and global and regional institutions tolerate and accommodate acts of warfare waged by a power elite against a large population located within space which that central power claims to own? What meaning might be ascribed to the phrase self-determination? When and how does this become relevant for the governance of a place or a people? I lived in Papua New Guinea for 11 years. Before I came to Australia, I grew up in England. And to some extent, there's a logic in, forget Paul Keating's parallel with Tasmania. There's a kind of strange logic that Australia might have deemed Papua New Guinea part of its own possession and a natural part of Australia, but Australia chose to encourage and allow self-determination of Papua New Guinea and its emergence as a nation. It was not a nation before. How do Taiwan's neighbours, including Australia, shape their own international relations and policies? Can interests be separated fully from values? Do democracies have an interest in supporting jurisdictions with which they share values? Are interests, including economic interests, placed at peril from time to time by the values of economic partners, including those that may be authoritarian or totalitarian? If Taiwan is assumed by the PRC, what is Beijing's next logical step? And if the PRC fails in a kinetic attempt to seize Taiwan, might this comprise an existential challenge for the CPP itself? I'm not, of course, going to attempt even to suggest there are ready or simple answers to such epochal tests or issues, but I trust that they illustrate that this terrain encompasses, on the one hand, and deeply regrettably, far weightier burdens than a successful pluralist rule of law democracy like Taiwan might ever expect to have to carry. And on the other, that this is very, very far from a matter purely of a brutal Keating-esque landlord seizing control of his own real estate and probably then evicting or eviscerating the tenants' leaders. Insofar as Taiwan is indeed a testing ground for huge matters, including those I've just listed, we really need to pay attention. This means letting the China-formed talking points that have to date largely obscured them take their natural, in my view, diminished place without diminishing our own outlook. Such talking points, which substantially derive from those set in train professionally and pervasively by the CCP, include, and I'll mention just four: the readiness of most Taiwanese people to concede sovereignty to the PRC if faced with a serious blockade. Number two, the likelihood of swift and easy success of a People's Liberation Army invasion of Taiwan. Number three, the irreversible decline of United States military power combined with the growing failure of political will as isolationism takes hold in the American population. And number four, the irrelevance of Taiwan to Australia compared with the central significance of our economic dependence on the PRC. Swiftly, in response to such talking points, Taiwanese people have not let themselves be threatened into submissive deference to the CCP so far, and following years of inexorable pressure. And it would be surprising if that were to change. Indeed, every sign points to newer generations identifying less with China and being less prepared to concede elements of sovereignty or self-determination. The waters and shallow seabed of the Taiwan Strait and the few potential landing places for an invading force present massive challenges, especially for a military that has not engaged in warfare since its defeat by Vietnamese forces 45 years ago. No military landing of this scale has been attempted since the Korean War more than 70 years ago. US forces are battle hardened. They have available ultra high-tech weapons. A US administration that loses Taiwan will be deemed, including by its key allies, Japan, Korea, Philippines, and Australia, and by important friend Singapore, to thereby, to a significant extent, lose Asia. Taiwan is not Afghanistan. American self-respect, as well as their respect and capacity for influence in the wider world, is palpably at stake. Whatever position our politicians, our political elites may adopt at the time, Australian voters will not tolerate the continued sale to the PRC of strategic goods, including iron ore, coal, gas, and critical minerals, if it were to launch an attack on Taiwan. These items represent 75% of Australian goods exports to China. Their loss would indeed be economically devastating, but not only to Australia. That fact also crucially underlines the importance of our playing a significant role in deterring Beijing from attempting to seize Taiwan. And in order for us to do this coherently and credibly, we also at the same time need to build closer relations with Taiwan, with Taiwanese businesses, NGOs, universities, and people generally, in order to reinforce our understanding of what's at stake, including those huge existential matters that I've listed. And in all this is framed our own identity as Australians. I might cite historical precedents, but that inevitably draws discussion away conveniently for those who favour inertia or inaction, or dare I say it, stability, from the more important issues coming into play. The Ukraine situation bears relevance, including because of the No Limits alliance contracted between General Secretary Xi Jinping and President Vladimir Putin only a few days before the latter launched his invasion, and the continued steadfast solidarity between the two political elites. The deterrence against such military risk-taking by Russia under Putin has become, which has become a semi-rogue state, was clearly inadequate. That is a crucial lesson from Ukraine. Another is that autocracies seek to demotivate and demobilize free states and peoples and make ample use of social media and of elite capture in order to achieve this. Our answers include developing whole of government strategies to counter negative consequences of the kind of tests that Taiwan, or rather the Taiwan dilemma, is setting. They include preparing capabilities to deny access to air and sea space, and indeed cyberspace, to malign actors. They include making available better educational tools for our citizens. They include taking precautions to build or rebuild supply chains that are resilient against hostile political interventions. In 21st century Australia, we don't merely tolerate, but celebrate cultural diversity. We must at the same time pool our political efforts to cohere around sovereignty, nationalism, unity of purpose. Nor are we done with globalization, which has brought so many in the world out of poverty and in our country into the middle class. Taiwan is also a testing ground for the continued success of that form of globalization that allows people and nations to pursue economically their greatest points of advantage. As the incoming chair of the CPTPP, we should invite Taiwan, a trading exemplar, to join. Finally, Taiwan's president, Lai Ching-Te, said at his inauguration 3 months ago, democracy, peace, and prosperity form Taiwan's national roadmap. They're also our links to the world, close quotes, including, of course, to us in Australia, whose own testing ground includes how we respond. Thank you very much for listening.